Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 17 of Out of Character, a show where your favorite creators drop out of character for an hour to talk with game designer and host Marc Tassin, that's me, about their art, their process, and the nerdy stuff that inspires them. From the secrets behind their craft to the ins and outs of the business to the games, shows, and books that they can't get enough of, it's a unique and candid look at the folks who make the stuff that you and I love. Now, we're finally back after our break for Gen Con, and we've got an amazing lineup of writers, game designers, artists, and musicians that will be joining us over the next few months to talk. I'll be posting a full schedule soon, so be sure to watch us on social media, follow us there, and keep track as we'll be posting our entire schedule there. The other thing that I wanted to note is that I am coming to you live from a secret bunker. Power is out in Southeast Michigan, and so I'm in a temporary location, but we should be back to normal next week when we come back. But with that said, let's get on with the show. As always, comments will be open throughout, and although we can't make promises, I will do my best to pull in some of your comments and questions as we go along. However, tonight I'm excited to introduce you to this week's guest, Lashawn M. Wanak. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Hi.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work, about the things that you do?
Okay. So I am a short fiction writer. I've written short stories for professionally written short stories for about 18 years. I've had my fiction's been published in places such as Uncanny Magazine, um, Apex. You would think I would know this by heart. Fire Magazine, Strange Horizons, things of that nature.
Well, the list
Um,
is long, so
the
you have
list
to
the
sit
list
there and
is
like sort of
long.
go through it. So they've got a long list of places where you've been published.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my short stories made it into the 2018 Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy Anthology.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
and that, oh gosh, see, it was my story that has a really long name because I love long names. Sister
Oh, what's it
Rosetta.
about?
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, no,
sorry.
I got it. So,
Okay, you got it. All right.
yeah, yeah. Rosetta Tharpe and Memphis Minnie sings the song, sing the stumps down good.
That's awesome. That is
So,
awesome. I'm sure that the layout person was thrilled. Uh,
yeah. So, yeah. So, and
oh, fantastic.
it's about uh real life. Well, it's an alternate history story, but
Mhm.
it involves the real life musicians of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who was a gospel guitar playing black woman,
Mhm.
and Memphis Minnie, who was a blues playing black woman musician, and basically both of them come together to save the world with their music.
So the people are real. The saving the world with their music part, might be real, but not in the way that you told the story about.
Yeah, yeah. I doubt what would happen in the story would happen, but it was fun to play with their characters and imagine, if they were put in the situations, how they would react. So it was
How
kind of
did you come
cool.
across them? How did you learn about them?
Um, I learned about Sister Rosetta Tharpe probably in the early 2000s. Um, so there was a movie that came out called Amelie,
Mhm.
a French movie, which was very popular. And in it, they had like a snippet of Sister Rosetta Tharpe playing a guitar and singing a gospel song. And I was like, "Who is that?" But at the time, I didn't really, you know, I didn't really dwell into her music until maybe a few years later, um, when she showed up again, I think on some YouTube special, and I
Mhm.
watched her and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there is a there's a gospel singer playing guitar. She's rocking the guitar. I need to know about her." So I wound up getting her biography,
Mhm.
her yeah, a biography of her, and just reading it like really blew my mind.
Mhm.
And, um, found out that there was a whole slew of like black musicians, like black women musicians who were also like
Mhm.
playing guitar. Um, so in that sense, I also stumbled across Memphis Mini. Actually,
Mhm.
no, what happened was that I asked a friend of mine, um, and this friend made me like a a a s- a mixed disc, a mixtape of Rosetta Tharpe's music, but he also drew in a whole bunch of other people, and Memphis Mini was one of them. So like I had all this music, and I was like, if what would happen if Memphis Mini and Sister Rosetta Tharpe got together? And so I got Memphis Mini's biography, found out that both of them lived in Chicago at at during like the early 1920s,
Mhm.
like 1910s, 1920s. So there was this little bit of like a bit of window of time when they both lived in Chicago at the same time. And then Rosetta, Sister Rosetta wound up going to New York, and that was where her career took off. And so I was like, "Oh, is there a way to keep her in Chicago?" But, how would I keep do that? And I was like, "Well, there has to be some sort of like, okay, this was before everything happened." It was like, well, the only way that I can keep her in Chicago is if there was a pandemic of sorts. And
Sure, sure, we all
so
get that, yeah.
yeah, so, that became the premise, and I also changed a little few couple of things about, Rosetta's, backstory, but, basic basically, they got to get together, and so this gospel singer and this blues singer basically become friends. Well, friends in a way that, Memphis Minnie is tolerant of
Mhm.
her, but, yeah, but it became this wonderful story that, just I tried to infuse it as much blues and gospel as I could,
You
and
know,
it did
it
well.
it's interesting because people always one of the questions back when we used to do the writers symposium when I ran that, one of the questions that came up all the time in panels were things like, "Where do you get your ideas?" And I think that the answer is like everywhere, from a mixtape that somebody gives you, from a one moment in one show, from a little bit of research you did. I mean, it sounds like this is a perfect example of that, how something just clicks, and all of a sudden you think, "You mean they were together? I wonder what would have happened," as you sort of go
Yeah.
down the what if trail.
Yeah, and well, as far as I knew, they never met each other in
Yeah.
person. So, but still, there was, that was when imagination kicked in. It's like, well, what if they did? What would that look like?
It's
So yeah,
interesting because a lot of ideas and stories seem to grow out of a desire to see something happen that has never happened before, and you wanna bring it to life so you can experience that magical thing that
yeah,
you're like, "It's I want this to be real, so I'm gonna make it real through story."
yeah. Yeah, a lot of my stories that I write tend to come from like
Mhm.
what if stuff. Um, but I also In s it also depends because sometimes it will be what if, but other times it'll be like, I read a story and I want to respond to it a different way, and
Mhm.
I saw earlier that you had the Never Too Old anthology, which just,
Oh, yeah.
met its Kickstarter goal, and in fact, met its stretch goal too, so I have a story in that. I wrote that this year. Um, I wrote it in a week. And so but, I've also I knew that I wanted to write a story. And basically, for your audience, this anthology was put together, by Outland Entertainment, and they basically the premise is, um people who are considered more in their midlife stage being called to do basically save the world. So,
Yeah.
because normally the call will go out to people who are young
Yeah.
and things like that. So,
Some 19-year-old or 20-year-old,
nineteen-year-old,
all of a sudden
yeah,
they're called to save the world. It's like,
hmm
maybe we should get someone with a little more experience. Just to throw
yeah,
that out
yeah,
there as an idea.
yeah. So, um, in this case, I've always wanted to write a portal story, particularly like an answer to Narnia, so to speak.
Okay.
And I actually I grew up. I I can't say that the Narnia books were the first fantasy books that I read,
Mhm.
because I know I was reading books before that. Um, but I do know that it was the first series where I realized, well, it was so bit of background on me. I grew up on the south side of Chicago,
Mhm.
but I also grew up. My mom was Christian, so all of us, except my dad, were Christians. So
Mhm.
that was an interesting dynamic. Um, we so when she introduced these books to me, it was like they were toted as Christian books,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and so you would see them in Christian bookstores and all that. Um, And it was like, "Oh, okay," I read them and I thought they were, awesome. They were, and this was back in the '80s, it's like, yeah, on the one hand, yes, it's a Christian book, but as it stood, it was a really gorgeous series, and
Yeah.
I fell in love with it, and I actually used to read it to my sisters and my cousins, before school, and I would do all the voices, I I would do repeat cheeks and probably like, I can't do it now, but I would do repeat cheap and all the other voices and um just had a blast reading those stories. But um it's one of the series where I actually will come back to time and time again because
Mhm.
even knowing the message and knowing C.S. Lewis, there are still parts of the stories that still captivate me. Um, but now also that I'm older, I'm also to look at them in a more critical lens, so to
Yeah.
speak. So the story that I have in the anthology, which is called "By the Works of Her Hands," is sort of like a response to the Narnia story, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, so, and in a way, also my stories also always do double duty because a lot of my stories, while there's stuff there that I'm responding to, it's also dealing with stuff that I'm dealing with. So it's
Mhm.
a way for me to work out my own issues, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so, um, the week that I wrote that story, I actually planned it. I had put stuff together. I just yet to write it because I was still trying to figure out, how I was going to write it, what it was going to look like, things of that nature. Um, and again, this was earlier this year, and I have a son
Mhm.
who was in his last year of high school. Um, and in the month of February, uh, he let us know that he was failing his grades.
Oh my. Oh god. Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprise.
So it's like we didn't know if he was going to go
Mm.
to, you know, graduate high school. And
Yeah.
it was like, ugh, how do we, how do we deal with this? So, so we were dealing with that. And at the end of February, I got the email from the anthology. It's like, okay, stories are going to be in a week. And I was like, oh, crud. I need to write this story.
Yeah, and you got one or two things on your mind, right? It's
Yeah.
like
And it was like at that moment, um, I sat down and the first thing I thought of was like, it's like I thought of this mom, this mom who has her son, and the opening paragraph, she's doing laundry when a portal appears in the laundry room. And she's like, "It's a portal. It's going to another world." Yeah, no, I ain't going through that because I know how the stories go. Um, things happen. Things that people who go into those portals are usually, white, young, privileged. It's like portals like that aren't meant for her. And at that moment, her teenage son comes down, looks at it, goes, "Holy cow." Well, he
Yeah,
doesn't say that, but
sure.
and then he jumps right into it.
Because that's
So,
what young people do.
because that's what young people do. And
I love
so
that she was doing laundry because the reality is that that's one reason why I think the call to adventure is often ignored by older protagonists because they just got stuff to do. They
Ye
got we got a lot going on. You
oh,
got
yes.
responsibilities, and you can't just
Yes.
jump in the portal and run away.
Yes. What yeah, so and I actually took that in mind too because, like,
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh god, I gotta have to go after him." So, she slings the last bit of laundry into the washer or into the dryer, slams the dryer door shut, starts it,
Of course.
and then she grabs, the nearest thing to go after her son, which happens to be a plunger, and so, yeah.
That's the
So,
best she's got at the moment,
that's
and
the best she's got.
well,
So,
that sounds fantastic. And so
yeah.
this is it still on Kickstarter right now, or did it already fund? Is it done?
It funded,
Okay.
and it's gonna be out in January 2023.
Okay.
Now, if people are going to be at Worldcon in Chicago in the next couple of days, I'm actually going to read from that story.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so, I'll read as long as I can. But yeah, I plan to be reading that on Friday. Let me check my schedule real quick. Yeah, yep, Friday at 4 o'clock in the DuSable room. So,
All
if you
right.
wanna hear me read this story, um, come watch me read, at ChiCon.
Oh, fantastic. And ChiCon, you said, is that
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Worldcon, yeah, yeah, Worldcon
Okay.
in Chicago, yep.
Got it. Oh, that's fantastic. And so I'm sorry, is that this weekend coming up? Oh my gosh.
In fact, I'm leaving tomorrow for it, so
Oh,
yeah.
wow. That's fantastic. Well, cool. And there's a lot of other really great authors in here, right? I'm looking at the
Oh,
list and
yes.
it's Maurice Brodus and Jim Hines and Lucy Snyder. I mean, a lot of really talented people in there. That's great.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be alongside them, and yeah, this really looks to be like a fun anthology. In fact, let me see, there's actually I think there's a video out. Oh, wait, no. We did a live stream, reading of it, like, a few weeks ago. I don't think the video is available, but,
They'll have to get the book. That's
yeah,
all there is
have to
to
get
it.
the
They'll just
book.
have to get the
Yeah.
book. So, well, that's awesome. And so now you've done a decent number of anthologies, it seems like, have you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And
Um,
with this one, how did you get invited to this one? Now, the reason I wanted to talk about it is that folks always have slightly different stories on how they end up in these, and folks always like, oh, I'd love to write for an anthology someday. I'm like, well, let's hear how people end up in these.
yeah, yeah. So I've actually this is the second time that I've written a short story for Outland Entertainment.
Hmm.
The first one, so this is my bookshelf,
Yes.
and so I can reach over and grab the books that I'm in. The
Excellent.
first one that I was involved with was Apex, World of Dinosaurs
Oh
anthology.
yeah.
So I was invited to that one by Alana Abbott. Oh, Alana Jolie Abbott.
Yeah.
So she invited me to write dinosaurs, and yeah, I that was this was back in 2019 before the world fell.
Mhm. Now, did
um,
you meet her at, like, a con or something, or did she hear about you through someone else,
I
or
think she heard of me through someone else, but
okay.
I'm trying to remember exactly how I met her. Um, I may have been introduced. Her name. She heard of my name through Melanie Meadows from Gen Con,
Yeah.
who suggested who suggested that Alana contact me for this anthology.
Yep.
And so and at the time it was like, she told me about, that it was going to be about dinosaurs. I was like, I never wrote a story about dinosaurs before. Okay, let's see what happens. So I wrote a story, and it's
I'm
called
sorry, there's an entire anthology about dinosaurs. That's just amazing, right? That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. It was a lot of fun. So basically, it was the story I wrote was called Smile,
Hmm.
um, and it's about a scientist. So the story starts off with a unnamed narrator, um, basically talking about this scientist who winds up blowing up her lab, which had samples of dinosaur DNA, and they had found a way to revive the dinosaurs,
Hmm.
these raptors, but this scientist blew it all up. And so the story goes into the reasons why she did so. And it was a fun it was a fun story to write, because I actually wound up consulting with several scientists on,
Oh, cool.
what exactly, basically asking them, well, if a dinosaur was able to be revived, how would it happen? And, you know, and finding a lot about dinosaurs in general. And not just dinosaurs, but also the scientific, like how scientists act and how they work and all the bureaucracy they go through. And so it was actually a really fun and eye-opening experience. So, and yeah,
So,
that turned into my story.
speaking of dinosaurs, I want you to tell me about this that I'm going to pronounce wrong.
Give it a
Giganotosaurus?
try. Sure.
All right.
I'm the editor and I'm still trying to figure out the pronunciation itself. So it's either Giganotosaurus or Giganotosaurus.
Okay.
I usually go with the latter pronunciation because it's easier to say.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So Giganotosaurus is um besides writing short fiction, I also edit a short
Hmm.
fiction magazine. So Giganotosaurus was started by Anne Leckie,
Oh, okay.
who and she is kind of still on it, but she's kind of like taking more of a behind the scenes role. And so I've been brought on as the editor of this short fiction magazine. We publish one story a month, between 5,000 and 25,000 words.
Hmm.
Um, we're actually going to be reopening for submissions tomorrow.
Oh,
Wait,
that's
tomorrow.
cool.
Wait, tomorrow? No, Thursday.
Thursday.
We open on Thursday, September 1st. So yeah, but yeah, we're a semi-pro market,
Hmm.
and so we kind of print stories, which is in between that awkward, either 5,000 or 25,000. So,
Yeah.
but you
What
get a
sort of
story a
stories
month.
do you guys like? What sort of stories what style of stories do you usually cover?
Yes. So, um, it's always hard to say because we get a lot of fantasy stories. I
Hmm.
would love to see more science fiction,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but I basically like everything in between. So it's kind of like it's kind of hard to say.
Sounds like stuff that doesn't fit neatly into one of those boxes
Yeah, yeah.
is
So
kind of an opportunity.
mhm. I tend to be more on the literary side,
Hmm.
so I like stories like that, but at the same time, I also like stories that make me laugh. Um, More stories that basically are unexpected, which
Hmm.
sh again, that's hard to say what that is. But, trying to think, like, the story that we just published, one of the stories we just published, oh gosh, it's our very first well, no, it's not our first annotated story, but it's the first annotated story that I bought.
Hmm.
Um, give me a second. I will pull up the name
Sure.
while I'm in a second, but, um, yes, In the Time of the Telperi Flower, um, which was written by it would help that yeah, Lashawn, it would really help if you actually had these up, but
That's all right. We
it's
never know what we're going to talk about. Is the
yeah,
challenge. So we sort of wing it
yeah,
as we go.
mhm.
I
It's
think that
by David Christopher Gallia. I hope I'm
okay.
pronouncing his name right, so but yeah, he wrote this amazing story that's like, you know, it looks on the surface like this, you know, this journal about this explorer, um you know, explorer who is going in and, you know, telling his side of the story, but the annotations that is where the story is at. And so it's basically this woman who is, you know, who was one of his guides, and basically, you know, she's you know, you know, basically snarking at everything he's saying. But
Yeah.
then it takes a turn, the more you read into it, and like it goes into this direction that I did not expect. And I was like, oh, okay, I really like this. This is, yeah. So that's, so it's hard to do stories like that, but if you're able to like write a story that basically keeps me reading and goes,
Hmm.
"Oh, this is something that I was not expecting to happen," you know,
Yeah.
there's a good
Well, that's
chance
very
that
cool.
yeah.
Well,
So
and is this story? This isn't out yet. Is that right?
no, it's out.
Oh, it's
We
out. Okay.
yeah, we published it in, oh gosh, I think it was a couple months ago.
And is
I
the magazine? Is it
in
purely
May.
online?
Yeah, it's yep. So the yep, at that website, yep. So
So anyone who wanted to could go there and read the story we were just talking about.
yeah. So, yeah, it was published in May. So, and one of the things that we also do is that we also publish in ebook formats. So,
Hmm.
if you don't want to read it online, but you want to download it, you can basically download we have both EPUB and MOBI formats.
Oh,
So you
that's
could
awesome.
just download it to your phone or to your Kindle or whatnot and just read it there.
That's very cool because I know a lot of people struggle with, they want to read on their mobile devices, but websites sometimes just don't play nice. And
Yeah.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's awesome. And so you're the editor there, and you guys are.
Yes.
And for everyone who is a writer and listening, they are opening up for submissions. So take a
Mm,
look at what stories they've published in the past, and
mhm.
look at what sort of stuff they're interested in. You'll get an idea.
Yep.
So that's one of the things that, generally when people are submitting, you don't want to submit the same thing, but it's always seems to me smart to take a little while to sort of look at what that publisher is interested in, what
Yeah.
fits with their vibe, of what they want to put out there into the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I need to remember too because I'm finally yeah, it's been a long time since I've actually submitted a short story, like, unsolicited.
Yeah.
I've now reached that level. It's like, oh, okay, people will actually ask me for stories. I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. But um, for the past, oh gosh, several years, I've been working on a short story. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't have, I just started. I started writing it way back in, I would say, 2019, and then the world exploded. and
Yep.
then and then stuff also happened that basically took up a large chunk of my writing time.
Hmm.
Um and it was just within the past year that I was finally able to pick up the short story again, and like had to remember, oh yeah, I need to remember how to revise and all that. So, which is funny because like I couldn't really remember. So I had to like sit down and reteach myself how to do revisions. And
Yeah.
as I was doing that, I was like, you know what? It would be good if other people knew how to do revisions too. And it just so happened that Clarion West had invited, a bunch of us to like submit, like workshop proposals.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to see what happens if I, suggest a revision workshop. And they took it. And so I led my very first workshop for Clarion West uh, early in January of this year, and went very well. And in fact, we're going to be doing it again.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm going
Well,
to be, yeah.
tell
Oh,
people what Clarion West is, because I think not everyone's going to know right offhand.
yeah, yeah. And while I do that, I'll bring up the website. So, Clarion West is a workshop that, well, it's part of Clarion. So it's
Hmm.
a 6-week workshop that usually happens every, I would say July, every June, between June and July.
Yeah.
Um, so they'll bring in authors to talk every week and you know, basically help, authors workshop their stories and things of that nature. Um, Usually around the time that Clarion is running, they have this thing called Clarionathon.
Hmm.
Clarion Clarionathon? Am I saying that right? Maybe. I don't know.
Like
Um,
Marathon, but Clarion.
yeah, yeah.
Got it.
So, usually around that time they're doing fundraising where write-a-thon. That's what it is. They're
Okay.
doing
All
they're
right.
doing they're doing write-a-thons. So, they're, they have people coming in who would do like these mini workshops and things of that nature. So, but yeah, but Clarion is also now starting to do like standalone workshops, and these are um usually either like one day or several sessions that help you with the craft of writing.
Hmm.
And a lot of people do it. I know Cat Rambo um, does a lot of the workshops for Clarion. So, and now I am too. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. And I've never had a chance to go, but it's one of those things that I always looked at and thought that looked pretty amazing. And I will say that it also was a little intimidating because to a
Oh,
certain, I looked at it and I was like, this seems pretty intense. I don't know if I'm up for that. What would you say to
yeah.
someone who felt like that?
Oh gosh.
Is that the right
So
attitude or?
so the standalones. So I speak as someone who has actually not never been part to a Clarion workshop.
Yeah.
I actually am a Viable Paradise alumni.
Hmm.
So I went in 2010 or 2011, but I was
Hmm.
part of I was part of the class of Viable Paradise. My words are running. Okay, Viable Paradise class of 15. So we were their 15th class.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and that's just a week. So so I'm gonna toot that a bit. So if you're intimidated by doing 6 weeks or you just don't have time, Viable Paradise basically takes that and condenses it into 1 week, which is super intense,
Hmm.
but it's also really, really good. And I learned so much when I went back in 2011. So, um, but yeah, but for the Clarion, for the standalone workshops, those are usually only like they're dependent on what the workshops are. They're only like, they can either be for one day or they could be for several sessions. Um, it's basically they have a lot of choices for you to look at. So I would just say go to their website and take a look and see. what's happening. So, and
Sounds like
oh,
there's a lot of options. It's not just
yeah,
fully immersive like the core thing is. There's other ways to get engaged and to take advantage of learning.
yes, and a lot of the standalones are virtual. So that's
Okay.
another thing.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so you could basically go online, and that's how we did my revision class. I basically did everything online, and we had basically I had mine in 3 sessions.
Hmm.
Um, and it was basically we were looking at it in depth. We wanted to look in depth into the nature of revision and editing. And so what's the difference between the two? How do you basically get yourself out? I call it revision hell,
Hmm.
because you're constantly revising and revising and revising until you lose track of where you are. And
Right.
so my class helps you to figure out where you are in the revision process,
Hmm.
what you need to do to move on to the next stage, and it basically gives you tools on how to manage your work. And so, yeah, so the first session is usually focused on revision, which is more larger scale, looking at plot, looking at characters, world building, things of that nature. And then the second session is focused more on editing, which is where you're getting more into like the weeds, like line edits and things like that. Um, and then I usually have students, take a break, go revise their own work using the tools that they learned. And then the third session, we all come back together and we all share on what we've learned and how we utilized it. So,
It sounds fantastic. I think that sometimes people underestimate the number of really cool opportunities that are available for learning, for honing your craft and getting access to people who are really good at this so that they can help you do that. I mean, the opportunities are absolutely out there. And that's
oh
fantastic.
gosh, I never thought that I would be teaching a workshop because I was very, when I was in college, I was actually offered to do an MFA
Hmm.
with the school I was with, and I couldn't do it because I knew it wasn't going to be covered by um, my tuition.
Hmm.
My tuition
Yeah.
was being covered by my job, which wanted me to go into a more business related,
Yeah. It was a little hard
thing.
to sell the
Yeah.
MFA.
Yep. So, um, I actually had to change my major from English to journalism so I can continue getting, tuition reimbursement. Um, and then sad to say, they actually dropped the program in the last year of my schooling. So it's like I was stuck with journalism, you know. But
Yeah.
but even if I did have the opportunity to, had my MFA paid, um, the stuff that I was writing, they weren't looking for. They wanted
Yeah.
more literary. They didn't consider science fiction or fantasy to be, viable.
Appropriate topics
Appropriate.
or
Yeah.
subjects to
It's
write
like
about.
it was popular fiction. We don't write popular fiction. And it was kind of
Right.
funny because like a lot of what I wrote for I took one creative writing class, and a lot of the times, I would write it, they were like, "Oh, this is magic realism." And I was like, "No, it's not, it's fantasy." So it's like, yeah, so I realized I honestly did not wanna mess with that, and so I honestly didn't really care. Um, but yeah, since then, that was when I discovered Viable Paradise. Um, that was when I just, and then I've kind of aspired to Clarion. It's like Clarion was a one day kind of, one a bucket list kind of thing.
Right.
But I've been basically writing for so long. And I said earlier that I wrote short fiction professionally.
Hmm.
I was writing way before that. And to be really honest, I cut my teeth on writing through fan fiction.
Okay. We were just
So
talking the other day about fan fiction with, I think, gosh, was it Kristen Britton I was talking to about fan fiction? I mean, it's
yeah.
amazing how many people just love that. And it's such a fun way to explore the stuff you love. So, what sort of fan fiction have you written? Can I ask?
Okay.
Like, what's your
Yes,
fan
actually,
fiction?
there
Yeah.
is if you actually did a search on my maiden name, you
Uh-huh.
would because actually I wrote it before I got married. You would find it. So I wrote Ron Mahaff and Sailor Moon crossover fan fiction.
Okay.
But but I was mainly a Ron Mahaff fan, so I wrote more Ron Mahaff stuff.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I started writing that while I was in college. And like I remember like I would be going to my classes and writing Rama fan fiction while in my classes. So not really paying attention, which is
Right, right.
probably contributed to one of the reasons why I eventually got pulled out because my mom said, I am not paying you to make Fs.
Yeah,
So
yeah, but you were writing, and look at what you're doing now. Apparently, that
yeah.
was the most important thing you could do while you're at
Oh
school.
gosh, I learned more. So I was part of a email fanfic list, which
Okay.
those don't happen anymore. But we were part of a mailing list that we did fan fiction, and it was there that I learned about, not just writing, but writing about how to write and how to get beta readers and how
Mhm.
to edit and revise. Um, and learning about character. So one of the best things about fan fiction is that it's a great way of learning. Like it's almost like a sandbox where
Mhm.
you already have these established characters, and it's like, okay, write a story where they're still in character. And we had discussions about what was in character and what's canon and what's not.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure.
so
Heated discussions.
oh yes, very, very heated discussions. So when you wrote someone who was out of character, people will let you know.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you can also find ways to write in character, but change things in a whole new way. And um after I got married, I actually stopped writing for a while because I was still
Mhm.
trying to figure out the whole marriage thing.
Yeah,
And
right.
it wasn't until my son was born, um, 18 years ago, that I remembered, oh yeah, I wanted to write. So that was actually when I started writing again. But
Mhm.
this time I was like, no, I'm going to try my hand on writing original fiction, and um, wound up doing that. And so I have a great story. What time is it?
Oh, we got
6:43.
time. Go
Oh,
ahead. We got
okay.
time for a story. I like great
Okay.
stories. We're
Okay.
good.
Um, so I actually also I started writing a novel back in college too. It was a fantasy novel. Um, but I wrote about 16 chapters of it and then got married, stopped writing on it altogether. When I picked it up again after my son was born, I didn't really know where to start.
Mhm.
And I was trying to continue it, but I didn't really know where I was going or what I was doing. And so this was back when I was living in a suburb of Chicago. Um, and so I found out that there was going to be like a writing, not exactly a writing conference, but a writing fest happening in
Okay.
Aurora, Illinois. It wasn't like a con,
Mhm.
at the time, but it had all the makings of a con in that there were panels and there were authors who would come, and they had book signings and things of that
They
nature.
were a con, but they didn't realize it. They
Yeah,
accidentally started a con.
pretty much. So, but also it was free. This is something
Oh,
else.
also good.
Yeah, so yeah. So, I found out that I found this out, and um one of the speakers, one of the authors who were there was Tad Williams,
Hmm.
and I'm a huge fan of his.
Yeah.
Um, I loved his Otherland series. So I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna go and see him." So, however, with the day that I was going to go out, um, I could not find a babysitter for my son, who was about a year and a half at that time.
Right.
So I was like, "Okay, I don't have anyone. I'm just gonna bring my son with me." So I packed up the
Do what you got to do,
stroller,
right?
do what I gotta do, and so, and it actually worked out well because, like, at one point, he took a nap, so I was able to attend some panels. And I got to hear him a little bit, but then my son got a little active and things like that. So, towards the end of the day, I went up to him, and it was just getting towards, like, the end of the day where people were leaving, but the festival was still kind of happening. Um, and so Tad Williams was signing books. And so I went up to him and, signed, when I got my book signed, and I was telling him, how much I wanted to be a writer, and, what I was doing, and if he had any tips or anything. And there was no one else behind me. So it's like, so he started talking. So we started talking a little bit, and it was like, "Well, do you have time now? We can talk a little bit more." And I was like, "Yeah, but at the same time, my son was like getting antsy. It's like, "Yeah, but
Yeah.
my son's been sitting in the stroller. He's been, he needs to get out." And it's like, "Oh, that's fine. We can do that." So for the next 45 minutes, he and I wound up like walking around like this huge space, this hotel space,
Uh-huh.
and while my son was running around, and we were talking about writing, and it made such a huge impact on me, such a huge impact. And he was just so nice, and he offered me so many great advice. And
Hmm.
um yep, and it just made for a very memorable time. And yeah, wound up going back, completely trashing everything I wrote on that original story novel,
Uh-huh.
wound up writing a new one, trashed that one, started rewriting it over again, got lost, went to Viable Paradise, figured out how to do it, trashed that version, started a whole new version, which was streamlined because
Hmm.
that last version was like, oh gosh, 220,000 words.
Yeah.
It needed to be cut. Um, and I finally finished writing it in, I would say, 2019,
Hmm.
20, either 2018, 2019. Um, and by this time, I've written enough short stories that people were starting to recognize my name.
Hmm.
Um, got myself an agent, and the agent is now shopping that book around.
That is fantastic. And I think that a lot of folks don't realize how hard that path is, that they think to themselves that I started it, but I've tossed it out because it was just terrible. That means I should stop. And it doesn't, right? That's the
Yeah,
process. That's what the process looks like for a lot of people.
yeah, and it's interesting because, like, there's a lot of advice out there where people say, okay, if you're going to write a book, basically trunk it, write another book. And for me, that was very hard because, like, I was really invested in these characters.
Yeah.
And I was like, and at that time, it's like, you know what? I would much rather spend more time refiguring out how to tell that story.
Hmm.
The short fiction for me is more of one-offs where I
Hmm.
don't have, and that's what I love about short fiction, in that, yeah, it's not as much investment, but you could play with the format so much with that, and you could tell some great stories within that short format. So I decided, you know what, it's like, if I'm going to write, stuff that I'm just going to send off and not think about anymore, I much rather do that for short fiction and spend more time deep into figuring out how to write long fiction, which, yes, on the one hand, it took me like a good, or not even like 18, probably a little more than 20 years to figure out how to write a novel. So, but
But
I
you
can,
got there.
I got there. Um, and then, yeah, over the past few years, couple of years, I've actually been working on a freelance gig that taught me how to write outlines,
Mm-hmm.
which I've never actually done before, but now I'm like a queen. Like I'm the queen of outlines now because I can
That's
outline
awesome.
like a boss. So
That is awesome. Well, we are almost out of time, and there's something we always like to do at the end of the show. And we like to put a spotlight on folks that maybe someone hasn't heard about, or that really maybe they just need to have, maybe they're new, maybe there's someone who's been around for a while. And you have somebody that you're going to share with us, and I'm going to let you pronounce his name because I would not want to mess it up. I'm afraid I would
yes.
not get it right.
So, if you follow me on Facebook, you would know that I follow Agena Chawe,
Mm-hmm.
Epeki.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just recently, well, he he has been he's been nominated for the Hugos.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it the he's a Nigerian writer who writes amazing fiction. And he's been nominated for 2 categories in the Hugo Awards, which is a first time for an African born writer.
Wow.
So he's been nominated in the novelette category and in the short form editor category. So,
Okay.
so it was kind of a little touch of go on whether or not he'll be actually able to attend. But just today, we found out that yes, he's going to attend Worldcon.
Oh,
So he's
fantastic.
actually at this moment flying from Nigeria to Chicago so that he can be, present for the Hugo Award ceremony. And I'm so excited that I can't wait because I mentored him back in
Mm-hmm.
2020 for SWIFA, which is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I got to be a mentor to him, which, to be really honest, I think he was more uplifting me because at the yeah when yeah I don't think I did a good mentoring job at all because the world was on fire and I was trying to make sense of things.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, he's amazing and he's fun to talk to, and I'm just so stoked that he, has this honor, to be nominated. So, yes.
Well, as
Um
always, I challenge everyone who's watching, go out and take a look. This is your chance to find something new, discover something that maybe you haven't heard of before. And so we could also help him to get more eyes on his work, which would be wonderful. So,
yes.
well, we are pretty much out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. This has just been
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah, thank you. This was a lot of fun, and yeah,
And
glad
have
to do it.
fun at Chigon this weekend.
I will. I
All
will. I'm
right.
looking forward to seeing people. So, and if you're attending Worldcon, come up and say hi.
All
So,
right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Well, folks, that's it. We are out of time. We need to wrap things up so that we can clear the way for whoever's coming next for us. Next week, be sure to join us. We have an amazing guest. Delilah S. Dawson will be joining us. She's written Spider-Man comics, Star Wars novels, countless other fantastic tales. So be sure to come back here next time, same station. Thanks again for watching, everyone. I hope you all have a great night and keep writing.